So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe during the holiday period. And here we are, the final DNF1 F1 podcast of 2022. We've seen so much go on this season. We've produced a lot of content for you guys, and I sincerely hope that you guys have enjoyed what we've been doing this year. I certainly hope that you have found us somewhat entertaining and of course informative as well. We've had so many great guests working in and out of Formula One, offering their expert insight and occasionally having a little bit of banter as well. No less, of course, with our illustrious DNF1 panel. And of course, if you are new to the DNF1 F1 podcast on YouTube or your favourite podcasting platform, you can support us by giving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform. It really does help us out a lot. And of course, if you do, we will generously reward you with a shout out on the next episode as our way of saying thanks. Of course, if you watch this on YouTube, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. We didn't quite reach our milestone of 1,000 subscribers. We certainly had a good go at it, but I'm pretty confident we can go past that milestone in 2023, and that's going to be a very big year for us. We're going to have a lot of great new guests. We're going to have some pretty new graphics, I suppose, if I can promise it on YouTube. It's going to be revamped. I'm really looking forward to what we've got in store for you guys in 2023. I certainly hope that you will join us on that journey. And of course, being at the holiday period, as we said already, I hope that you guys are doing okay. And, you know, you're looking forward to the holiday period, whether you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah, for example, or Kwanzaa, whatever holiday that you'll be celebrating during this period. I really hope that you, your friends and your family, everybody are doing okay. I hope you have a good time. Of course, this episode is going out on the Friday before Christmas, so if you are one of those people, unfortunately, not able to spend time with friends and family during this period, I certainly hope that by tuning into the show that we are offering a little bit of a light in your day, and we appreciate you inviting us into your home during this time. So certainly hope we're doing it justice. All of the pleasantries and everything out of the way, in this episode, to round off 2022, we wanted to engage with you guys a few weeks ago on our socials, and if you haven't followed us on our socials yet, make sure you do. We leave our socials in the show notes, and of course you'll see them if you watch this on YouTube. We asked you guys to give us a bit of an F1 wish list. List some things that you would like to see change or happen in F1, whether that's to you or relevant to the sport, and make it a bit like a Christmas wish list. What could Santa give you if he was an F1 fan? Joining me on this episode, we've got Lee Wallington, the regular DNF1 panel member, joining me. And yeah, we're going to go through some of these, Lee, and going to have a bit of fun with this one as well. And first of all, how are you doing, mate? And are you ready for the holiday period as we round off 2022?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. I'm really looking forward to Christmas and obviously spending time with family and having plenty, well, probably too much food and drink, but that's what the New Year's resolutions are for, to help get back into shape after overdoing it. But yeah, it's just having that time off is going to be really nice for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's pretty much what it's all about when it comes to this time of year. Good friends, good food, good family, good vibes. It's the most important thing. And, you know, as I said, yeah, just go all ham, really. I mean, I'm the sort of person that when I kind of get into the swing of things when it comes to the food, yeah, I'm kind of glad that New Year's resolutions come around about a week afterwards, and you can sign up to whatever gym you go to and work all off all that Christmas weight, really. So, yeah, I think without any further digression from the F1 talk, we should probably talk about some news which is less than joyful, if you think about it. Probably don't have to think too hard, to be honest. But the FIA seemed to be going down the FIFA route, following what was a very, very good FIFA World Cup in terms of the football. But of course, anyone that followed beyond the football stories would obviously have noted a lot of the issues regarding human rights and the LGBTQ plus community, and all of that went with it. And there was a lot of arguments on both sides of this. It seems to have found its way towards the FIA's line of thinking, in line with FIFA, in terms of drivers and teams putting forward promotion of political causes. I mean, it depends on which way you look at it. They could be humanitarian, but of course it depends on what the FIA is saying. And they've had 2 new regulations inserted in. Just going to quickly read them out for you. And according to Article 12.2.1.n, the general making and display of political, religious and personal statements of comment, notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statutes, unless previously approved in writing by the FIA for international competitions or by the relevant ASN for national competitions within their jurisdiction. Basically, long story shortly, that means that any teams or drivers that want to put forward any promotion for what the FIA deem as a political cause will have to be given their prior approval before they can do it. This means that certain causes that we've seen promoted, and I'm not suggesting that these are political, I'm going to leave that up to you guys listening to make your own minds up on this, but certain causes, like we said, the LGBTQ plus community, Black Lives Matter, that we saw Mercedes and Sir Lewis Hamilton be very vocal and promotive of, the war in Ukraine, another example, something that we saw the FIA and F1 promote quite emphatically during the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. They got everybody together to promote for that and stand with Ukraine, and of course some of the action they took regarding Nikita Mazepin, and obviously the funding that got him a seat at Haas, and obviously Haas had to make a decision there in response to the conflict that was going on. So all of these things that we've just mentioned, they're now going to be subject to FIA prior approval. I'll be honest with you, mate, I can see this being quite a controversial issue throughout the year, especially in terms of what is deemed a political cause versus a humanitarian one.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's not going to go down well with some drivers and teams. Some drivers, like the first one comes to mind, is Sir Lewis Hamilton, who's obviously quite vocal regarding his opinions on certain causes and how with his custom helmets and shirts, and like the now retired driver, but Sebastian Vettel was also very vocal in such causes. So I'm sure there are other drivers that are just as vocal on causes, just don't obviously have the following that those two do. But even just as teams, it's potentially going to cause headaches, because where does the FIA put the line? First comes to mind is obviously Mercedes and their black livery they had for Black Lives Matter. The FIA, I know that's past livery, and they're now gone back to the silver, but the FIA, oh, that's political, you can't do that. And the Mercedes, well, that's just the colour of our car. We know there's no political meaning behind it. Well, we think it is, and like, we don't think it is, and then they're going to go back and forth and bring the sport into disrepute, making it look silly that they can't agree on just the colour scheme. You think back to Haas before the Ukraine war, they had the red, white, and blue, the Russian flag. If there was a Russian sponsor, why not you just do the red, white, and blue? And it's like, but the war in Ukraine, where it's like, that's just the colour of our car. It's the colour scheme.
And remember, Lee,
so many connotations.
Yeah, this was at a time when Russian athletes weren't allowed in international sports to represent Russia. You know, Mazepin was an independent athlete at the time, so this was kind of a clever way for the Russian sponsors to have their flag on the car, but it not to be attributed to the flag itself. So, you know, it's very, very strange how this is going to work. I can see this one being a very controversial one throughout the year. I'm not going to comment on some of these causes, and, you know, because the thing is, one of the arguments we saw during the FIFA World Cup in terms of the legitimacy of Qatar not being a fit and appropriate country to host a global event as big as the World Cup because of its human rights record and because of the way it treated the LGBTQ plus community, and obviously some of the rationale that was embedded as to why they did this, etc., etc. F1 has a shrouded history and a shrouded past, quite a recent one, in terms of some of the venues and where Grand Prix have been held. I mean, we saw what happened in Jeddah, for example, where the drivers, obviously there was a huge explosion near the circuit, and it was related to an attack of some sorts. I'm not going to go into details in that, but it did compromise the safety and security of the drivers, and a lot of fans felt that F1 is at risk of potentially selling itself to venues where they have these issues. But of course, a lot of people argued, well, you already go to a lot of those places anyway in the Western world. Not to get too sidetracked into this and to get down that political rabbit hole, which of course, you know, is so controversial. It does feel right now that there's going to be a lot of news and a lot of talk following this piece of information the FIA have pulled out in terms of what is deemed political and what is the right way to go, really.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of discussion, especially once we're now in the quiet lull season of the winter break. But once cars start running for testing, I'm sure we're going to start hearing something, especially when we get closer to circuits where there are drivers or teams will have calls to want to put a political statement. That's where it's going to explode. So the first track that comes to mind where we'll probably be driving at would be Bahrain, for example. That's where they probably will first. No, we're starting in Saudi Arabia.
I think we're starting in Bahrain this season. In 2024,
Okay.
It's being moved to Jeddah, I believe.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's a good point. That is quite relevant.
So that'll be the first circuit, and that being the start of the season, it's where it's going to blow up in the media and make the sport look silly. They're just obviously trying to make the sports and integrity and not lose economic value. And obviously the hosts don't want this bad press, but all it does is going to bring bad press to the sport in another way.
I think so too. I mean, I know for a while now this has been an issue with F1 and certain circuits that it goes to, and the rationale. I mean, the Russian Grand Prix was a regular fixture on the calendar until that was removed following what was going on in Ukraine. So there's going to be arguments to be made by fans and people involved in these causes that will say, well, F1 is just, or the FIA, I suppose, are just using this as an opportunity so that it could sell itself to practically almost any venue that may prospectively want to host a Grand Prix. I mean, Qatar is going to be hosting a Grand Prix this season. So, it's going to be quite interesting. Not a lot of people were talking about this, I remember, in 2021 when we went to this Losail circuit, which was at the venue where the World Cup final was just played. So it's going to be an interesting one to see what happens. And I, for one, am certainly not going to offer an opinion on this one because it just opens up a rabbit hole of so many other things. And I think you would agree, Lee, I don't think we want our show to turn into a political debate, when I think a lot of people listening to this will probably appreciate us talking about the F1. But of course, we will report the news as and when we hear it, and obviously significant updates that come with that. And maybe if people are interested, maybe we'll have a more open discussion about this issue as and when the time is appropriate. We'll have to wait and see. But that's all in the future. Let's worry about now, and let's talk about something a little bit more fun. Christmas and the holiday season, and F1 did a bit of a Secret Santa as well, Lee. I don't know if you saw that. Quite interesting. My favourite gift was the one that Charles Leclerc gave to Max Verstappen.
Yeah, that was my favourite one.
That was a pretty good one. For those, for those that didn't see, F1 does its regular annual Secret Santa, and you all know how Secret Santa works by now. You pull a random name out, you give a gift to that person, but they don't know who got the gift for them. And there's always a bit of fun sometimes trying to figure out who got you a certain gift. No clues for guessing who got Max Verstappen's gift, and Max Verstappen received a copy of F1 2022, the video game, and all three of the avatars on the front cover were Charles Leclerc. And some sort of Champions edition as well. So it's just a friendly little banter between friends. But I'd certainly admire the ingenuity of a gift like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's all meant in jest, but it is a very funny aspect, and it is a shame that some drivers don't partake in it because it is just an interesting social thing for the fans to see from drivers. You just imagine if not that Lewis doesn't take part, but if Lewis got Max, what he would give Max as a present.
That would be quite interesting.
With Max to Lewis.
See, now this is the thing. I could see this as an opportunity for Max and Lewis, seeing as we've mentioned them, to have a little bit of fun over their rivalry and to draw a little bit of banter, I suppose, which obviously in private, the two of them, when they're racing and the helmets are on, all gloves are off and everything, we've seen that this season. But when they're out of the car and they're talking with each other, I'm not suggesting for a second they're the best of friends, but there's a lot more respect there with that rivalry of each other, and they do get on relatively well despite everything that gets said around them. And I feel like that would be translated quite well with something like a Secret Santa. I'm not sure the F1 fan base would probably see it like that, depending on which side of the coin you are. But as I said, it would be quite interesting to see. Maybe that's why Sir Lewis perhaps doesn't partake in that sort of thing, just because of, I don't know. I mean, the guy's a busy man and he does his own thing, so each to their own. But, I suppose maybe next year we'll see. But it's always fun for everybody else as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And obviously, just quickly touching on the Max and Lewis relationship, it gives a chance to potentially heal the slight rift that we have in the fan base if you see the drivers
Mm. Oh, absolutely.
getting on outside of the track and doing a Secret Santa. But that's Lewis. Obviously is probably not going to hear our feedback on that. So
I'd be very surprised if he did, if I'm honest with you, Lee. I'm sure the great man has got plenty more
yeah,
better things to be doing than listening to our little show, talking about Secret Santa and stuff like that. All relevant topics, of course. So let's start with this wish list. So yeah, just as a reminder, we sent out a tweet and also Instagram post a few weeks ago and to ask you guys to submit your wish list items for F1. So basically the equivalent of going into your local shopping centre or mall, wherever you're listening, or if you're listening in the States, going to see someone dressed up as Father Christmas and asking them what you would want to change in F1, if there's anything that you would want in particular or anything you'd want to change. And so we're going to read out some of your guys, and thank you again, guys, for sending them in. Really, really appreciate that. I was a little bit worried we weren't going to get much of a response, but I'm glad that we did. So shows the DNF1 family is growing very, very strong at the moment. We're going to start off with one from the Daniel F1. And just a disclaimer, if I do pronounce any of your usernames or handles wrong, I do apologise in advance. Daniel writes, I think Seb put it best when he said, bring back the effing V12s. Now I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not going to swear, but that was what race was that, Lee? When Seb had an engine issue and he wanted I think it was the V10s. I know he said V12s on the radio, but I think he meant the V10s. Was it the Spanish Grand Prix a couple of years
to be
ago?
honest, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think it might have been the Spanish Grand Prix in 2019 or something mad like that. I'm probably wrong, but I remember Seb saying something along those lines, and I guess, Lee, it's probably along the lines of what Daniel was saying, is that we need to bring back the old V10 engines, or at least the V8 engines, compared to what we have now with the V6 turbo hybrid. Would you agree with that? What do you reckon?
Personally, the sound is nice, but I think the V6s are the better engine. It's obviously the modern ability or modernizing the sport, but it's not really words. I've just made that up. But modernizing, there we go. That's the word I was looking for. Modernizing the sport and having relevant engines. As much as they don't have the wow factor, I think it'd be a step in that aspect to go to that. Although I wouldn't mind them being louder V6s, but that's part of obviously the hybrid nature of the engines that you don't have that waste energy going out into sound. But wait and see on the 26th, that may have a louder aspect because of obviously the way they're potentially going to design the 26 engine.
Yeah, I mean, efficiency has always been the key driver for the V6 engines, and I'll be honest with you, as much as I loved the sound of the old V10 engines, even the V8s if you like, I remember Fernando Alonso at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix last season, or 2021 actually, was doing some hot laps around there in his old Renault R25 that he won a world championship in, and that sounded phenomenal. Even Sir Lewis Hamilton, he stopped halfway through an interview in the paddock to basically appreciate the sound, saying that's how an F1 car should sound, and I absolutely love that. The only thing is, I've kind of gotten used to these V6s now. It's kind of like a lot of things that we see in F1, with the halo and the way that the cars change shape every few years and stuff like that. When the new aero regulations change, you get used to it after a while. I certainly miss it and I would love it. I'm not sure if it's going to happen though at all, let alone anytime soon. It's possible. We saw something like a demonstration that Seb Vettel did in the old, was it the I can't remember what model FW was, might be like 22 or 23, something like that. I think it was like Nigel Mansell's 1992 Williams that he won the World Championship in. And Seb was doing a run with a V10 engine, a V10 Renault engine that was running on synthetic fuels. I know F1 is pushing quite heavily for synthetic fuels as part of its net zero carbon targets for 2030. We could get to a point, Lee, where if that proves to be successful, we may see a return of V10 or V8 engines running on synthetic biofuels or stuff like that, which may provide an opportunity to not just bring back the sound of those cars, which we all miss sincerely, but also make the cars lighter and smaller and make them more agile, which I'm sure you and I, obviously having watched those eras when they were like that, will agree that those were some really fun times to watch an F1 car at full throttle.
Oh yeah, basically just go-karts with a massive engine on the back, effectively. Right, the go-karts don't have that kind of aero, but the weight to horsepower ratio was a lot greater than they are now. So just the movability of those cars, it's something the sport has lost. So that would be nice getting that lighter car back. But that's some of that is also safety. That's increased weight from a safety, not just in the engine.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this the other day actually, because you'd mentioned go-karts, and someone said, "Oh, they should do go-karts at Monaco instead." Or something. I mean, probably. I mean, Formula E don't seem to have a trouble racing in Monaco, so there's clearly a size issue at play. Although looking at the cars for this year, we'll have to wait and see if that still continues. But I always remember when I was growing up on Eurosport back in the 90s. This is me showing my age here. I think they did it to like the early 2000s. We used to get an event where the Formula One drivers used to do like a karting event in France, ran some kart track, an indoor kart track. People that watch this will know what I'm talking about. And we used to get loads of the F1 drivers involved. Michael Schumacher was usually quite involved a lot in these. Senna used to do a few of these back in the late 80s. It was really fun stuff. It was like one of those things where you could get all the drivers together in equal machinery and go-karts and just smash around the circuit, sometimes into each other as they're doing it. It would be quite fun. I'd love to see them bring that back. I think that'd be really good. It'd be a nice opportunity for people to sort of see, okay, everyone's in equal machinery. Who is going to be the fastest, and who would be the fastest karter? I mean, what do you reckon, Lee? I'd like to see that. And if so, who do you reckon would win a kind of race like that? Or who would you bet on to win?
I mean, I would actually. That's actually quite. I didn't know they did that, but that does sound pretty cool.
Mm.
And I mean, Formula One can make a big thing of that and set it as a not a non-championship race, but you get all the TV rights, you get the career, and that's a whole unofficial Formula One event, and all the money that comes with that.
I'd pay to watch that. That would be fun. Even at the end of the season, post-season thing.
But my money would be on Fernando. He's heavily involved in his karting circuit in northern Spain. He gets every opportunity he can to go on the go-kart, and he always moans it's the car, not him. And he does drive pretty well in the Formula One car. So given the equal machinery, Fernando is definitely going to be one to watch it if that ever happened.
Yeah, I'd probably fancy Fernando to be one of the favourites to win that. I mean, obviously, there's obvious candidates like Max and Sir Lewis, obviously. But obviously, how much did they kart now? I'm not sure. I can't remember the last time I remember seeing a video or anything about Sir Lewis karting. But Fernando's always on it, and Daniel Ricciardo used to be quite active in a go-kart in season as well. So Lando Norris as well, Carlos Sainz, they'd be quite tasty because they used to do a lot of stuff like that when they were McLaren teammates. So you never know. There might be a surprise candidate. Might see Lance Stroll be dominating in the go-karts. It might change people's perception of him. It'd be quite fun.
Oh yeah, it'd definitely be fun. I think it's a good idea. If it would happen, I don't think that will ever return, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe we could do that instead of the Race of Champions, because I like the Race of Champions. It's a bit of fun, but to me, I feel like it's gone a bit stale lately. And I think it was like the highlight the other year was when Lucas Blakely, the esports champion, beat Sebastian Vettel in a road car race. I think it was Lucas Blakely that did it, but yeah. So obviously that was a big shock at the time, but Lucas obviously quite handy, whether it's in the sim or whether it's in a real car. So yeah, maybe something like that would be quite fun. Maybe F1 should bring that back. Maybe if the fans get enough traction behind something like that, they could probably introduce it, as you said, Lee, as one of those exhibition events, not worth any championship points, just for a bit of fun. Maybe a bit of money chucked in as well, just try and add the incentive for the drivers to do it, or make it for charity. I don't know.
Yeah, the money probably would be. I think fun and charity is probably a more commendable thing to do. But yeah, the drivers should love racing. That's what they're supposed to do, be it for paid or for fun. They're all supposed to love racing, so that they should want to do.
That's it. I'd be all over it. It sounds hilariously fun. I'd love to try that, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe one day if we ask loud enough. So we got some more. We got Luke from the 1892 Reds podcast, who's been on this show before. He mentioned something related to DNF1, and he said he would like to see us do a forfeit show. I'm not sure if we're going to do a show for forfeits, but basically along the lines of whoever gets the 2023 predictions with the least amount of points will have to do a forfeit. So in a way, Lee, this is kind of similar to what we did recently where we did the review.
Yeah.
And we had the point system, which I won, controversially, of course. And whoever gets the least points should do a forfeit. I think that's something we could probably accommodate for next season. I think we'll have to agree a set structure of sort of questions that we're awarding points for. Make sure everybody has a fair enough amount of opportunities to do the same sort of thing, rather than me having loads of prediction opportunities and Courtney having, I think, none, technically.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have been a fair fight, and might have been a different outcome if you'd had been given what I was in that regard. So yeah, maybe we could introduce something like that next year. I'm not quite sure what I'd have in mind for a forfeit, but I suppose a brainstorming session or two probably would help.
Yeah, well, it could be done, but my counter suggestion, if as he has been a guest on the show, if he's the one suggesting it, he has to be involved in our predictions, and then he can do a forfeit if he's the the loser. It
Well,
was
we'd
his
have to wait and
suggestion.
see. We'd have to wait and see if he was if he'd partaken that. So we got some more. We got Chantel Pine. Thanks, Chantel, for your wish list suggestion. So she's done a two-parter here. She's gone for a Mercedes 1-2 end of next season. I'm assuming she means the championship. So it'd be interesting to see what order she'd like it to be in. But she also put for Silverstone to drop their race weekend ticket prices. I mean, that's a pretty big wish list item, and that was something that Silverstone was quite famously criticised for, the fact that they had dynamic ticket price changes. As a lot of people that were trying to get tickets, I remember it was so difficult to get tickets for next year's Grand Prix, and the prices were changing when there were less seats available. They were going up and up and up. So obviously that was a big no-no, which they had to rectify. I suppose in a cost of living crisis in the UK, not to get too political on this one, reducing ticket prices for the race weekend is probably not a bad idea, but then the problem is you've got costs going up and up and up for hosting fees, and I know Silverstone is obviously one of the gems in the F1 calendar, but with the amount of races trying to get on the Canada League, I suppose no race is safe. So definitely something I'd wish for from selfish reasons or from a consumer perspective, but I'm not sure how realistic that would be.
Yeah, I don't think that will be any chance of the prices going down, unfortunately. Silverstone is one of the more expensive circuits to see a race, but compared to other circuits. And obviously, sometimes it is more cost effective, especially being in Europe, the amount of races we have in Europe, to travel to other places to watch a race in Europe actually works out more cost effective than in the UK going to Silverstone for a weekend. So in those instances, some research could be done to get a cheaper price. But yeah, I don't see the prices going down for Silverstone, unfortunately, as much as I would love it to as well.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, as you mentioned, we saw some races abroad, like Hungary, for example. I think I remember hearing last year that a silver level ticket, which I'm not sure if it's like the third best option or the second best option, depending on what happens with Paddock Club, if that's gold or not. But I think someone said that the most expensive silver level ticket was still cheaper for the whole weekend than a day or a ground pass at Silverstone for the day,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
quite
Hungary's the
shocking.
cheapest one in Europe.
Yeah, of course, if you don't include flights and accommodation and everything that comes with it. But yeah, so an interesting one. The other one from Chantel Lee, what do you reckon? Mercedes 1-2 probably sounds pretty good for you, at least.
Well, I mean, it'd be nice, but only if it's been an interesting season. I don't want a dominated season, be it Mercedes, be it Red Bull, be it Ferrari. I want close racing.
I
So
think, yeah.
if it ends with Mercedes 1-2 and it's been a close racing, then fair enough. Hats off to Mercedes. They've driven well, both drivers. The team's done well. But if it's just a cakewalk like it was in 2014, no, it's. I really hope that's not the case, personally.
Yeah, we kind of want 2021, but without the drama, controversy, and the jeopardy. And I don't think you can get one without the other, unfortunately, especially with the rivalries that seem to be brewing year after year. But you know, it's one of those where, whilst some people, depending on what team you support, I mean, we could change this depending on the team. Chantel being a Mercedes fan, but I'm pretty sure Red Bull fans would have been delighted if Sergio Perez had finished P2, although perhaps maybe not so, probably don't care for that too much as long as they dominate the championships. Or in my case, I wouldn't mind seeing the Ferraris dominate, but each to their own. But I think we can all agree that we'd all want to see an exciting championship as long as our favourite driver or the one that we're rooting for wins at the end of it.
Oh yeah, that's probably everyone would probably agree on that. But yeah, we have to wait and see how the next year goes.
Exactly. Next one we've got from Vulcan Motorsport. Our friend Samit from Vulcan Motorsport has done a great video recently about Sebastian Vettel. I definitely recommend you guys check that out. In fact, I will leave a link in the YouTube description for our friend Samit on that one, and we're definitely getting him on the show in 2023. We've waited this one long enough. He's wrote, "Endless success to the DNF1 F1 podcast. That's what I want." That's what I want as well. To be honest, but no, I appreciate the supportive words on that one, Samit. And but of course, you guys can make Samit's wish list true by just subscribing to the channel and liking the video and giving us a 5-star review. So enough plugging aside, we appreciate the support. Let's move on to A Girl Talks F1. Menena, who's been on the show a few times, she wants to party with Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo. That's probably a pretty good party, Lee, to be fair. I mean, is there a driver out there that you would want to go out on a night out with or have a party with? I mean, Danny Rick's probably up there. Max probably is up there, to be fair, as well, when he lets his hair down.
Daniel would probably be the number one on that. I imagine he, being an Aussie as well, the Aussies know how to have a good party. So, yeah, he'd be my choice. Now he's back in the Red Bull family. It's it could be possible with Max and Daniel, especially as Red Bull do seem to do well in Mexico. Never know.
Well, there you go, and they'll both be part of Red Bull next season. Maybe Daniel, this would be one of his events where he goes. I mean, Red Bull obviously want to be very popular in Mexico, so Menena, get yourself down there next season in Mexico. That might just come true for you if you're persistent enough. So Red Bull, if you are listening, let's hook our friend up and try and get her to get in a party with Verstappen and Ricciardo, whatever they got planned in Mexico. Sounds like a good party. We might have to try and join on that one if it's possible. Are there any other drivers, Lee, that you'd want to go on a night out with? I mean, there's a few I could think of. I mean, I reckon Sir Lewis would be fun, but he's one of those guys that I kind of get the opinion that, or the vibe that he fits into a group rather well. He's not the life and soul of the party in the same way that perhaps Ricciardo or Verstappen might be.
Yeah, I've got a feeling Lando would probably be a.
Lando's kind of PC or PlayStation lobby kind of party rather than a night out.
I was more thinking. I know they're not teammates anymore, but the dynamic duo Lando and Carlos and just the trouble they could potentially get up to on a night out. That'd be that would be interesting.
I reckon George Russell would be a good laugh on a night out.
Yeah. His shell would just come off.
That's it. That's what I mean. Like the shell comes off. Like he's not worried about F1. He's not worried about looking at the data or being the ultimate professional or anything like that. Lets it all down as a bit of a rave. I mean, we've all seen that GIF of George dancing in a nightclub with his mates. It's always used so positively. That'd be quite fun. Just trying to think of anyone else. I mean, maybe not Fernando and Seb. I kind of get the idea that Seb. I love Seb to pieces, but I just don't think he's the sort of night out kind. Or maybe he is. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm wrong. And it's the sort of guy that, if I suppose as you get older and you start to appreciate the pubs rather than the clubs a little bit more. And I think you and I are probably at that age now. I've certainly been that for some time, to be fair. Probably enjoy a night out with Seb a little bit more, but it'd probably be a little bit more, what's the right word? Calm, I suppose.
Yeah, more civilized night out.
Yeah, but it's still a good one though, isn't it? It doesn't have to be like a mad rave or anything like that. I mean, if you're looking for pure energy, then Danny Rick and Max and maybe Lando and George are probably more akin to that. I'm just trying to think if there are any drivers that I don't think would be much fun on a night out. I mean, maybe I feel bad for picking someone out, but actually I'm going to put that on you, Lee, first before I make it awkward for myself. Is there anyone out there that you, not necessarily someone you wouldn't want to go on a night out with, but someone that might not necessarily be as fun to go on a night out with if they asked you? See if we pick the same person. I've got one person in mind.
I'm thinking of Joe.
No, I'm not thinking Joe. I think Joe would be quite fun a night out. Again, he's one of those characters that I think is a little bit misunderstood, perhaps in the Western media, and it's our fault for not really giving him the time of day in that regard. But I feel like once he comes out of his shell, I think the real Joe sort of comes out and he's more approachable. I think, I might like him. I get where you're going with him. I think it's just because we haven't heard much from Joe.
Yeah, there may be that.
And it's because of that we get the wrong impression of him. I was thinking, I don't know why, but I was thinking someone perhaps like Yuki Tsunoda.
Me, Yuki was my other thought, to be honest.
But I don't know why. It's one of those, I just look at him and I feel like, oh, he looks so young, he wouldn't really fancy a night out, or he'd be too young to go anywhere on a night out, even though he's not. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I don't know.
Don't know, to be honest.
I'm stumped, really. I mean, probably says more about me, and I apologise. But let us know, guys. Which driver would you like to go on a night out with? And let us know one that you may not want to go on a night out with. Not necessarily because you don't like them, but because you might not think that that's very fun. I digress. Let's look at some other predictions that we had. So we had one from interesting email, Kimmy 777. Absolutely love that. He mentioned a freeway title fight between Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, and in addition to that, inter-team battles in the top three to go with that. I mean, we're getting greedy with that one, aren't we? That's the pinnacle, isn't it? That's what we all want.
That'd be a juicy season if there's a two-way inter-team fight and then a three-way team battle. Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was one of the ones that we got a lot of along those lines. I mean, a freeway title fight. I mean, let's be honestly, since the turbo hybrid regulations were introduced in 2014, we've kind of always had two teams fighting at the top, sometimes one with Mercedes. We had that this year with Red Bull and Ferrari for most of it, then Mercedes came to the fore. But when all three of them were kind of somewhat level and fighting each other like we saw at Silverstone, it was fantastic. It was just unfortunate we never really got to see that very, very often. And hopefully that's something we'll see as these regulations start to mature during their time span.
Yeah, well, I'll get the words out. The time that comes to mind about a three-way title fight is 2010 when we had McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull.
Vettel, Hamilton, and Alonso.
Yeah.
Although
that wasn't really an inter-team fight, but there was between Seb and Mark Webber.
We did have one at McLaren a little bit with Button, but Hamilton that season, he had Button covered that year.
But the inter-team fight in 2010 was more Red Bull. And you could maybe argue 2012 with 7 different winners in the first 7 races. But after the 7 races, obviously Red Bull started to clear away. But as the budget cap stays in the force and closes the margins between the teams, I'm sure we'll get that 3-way fight. And we obviously have so much hope coming into this year that we'll have that. So we may get it next year as the financial penalty hits Red Bull, and see what impact that may have. Ferrari pick themselves up and Mercedes obviously aiming to close the gap. We may see a scenario, especially the first part of the season, where we do get that what appears to be a 3-way fight before maybe it disappears into the second half of the season. I would love that, especially and the teammates going head to head to see what Jordan Lewis actually happens in the hot seat, and Carlos and Giles in the hot seat. Although I do think Max has Sergio covered, I don't think that's going to be too much of an inter-team battle. That'd be very interesting if Sergio manages to turn the tables on Max.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I can't see all 3 teams having inter-team battles. I can certainly see one at Mercedes, with George having a year of experience underneath him. And obviously, whilst there are caveats as to why George Russell finished ahead of Hamilton last season, I'm certainly sure that he will take a lot of confidence from that. Hamilton certainly will want to write the record in that regard, especially if Mercedes have a much more competitive car. Ferrari, not sure if we're going to see an inter-team battle there. Sainz, towards the latter half of the season, was much closer to Leclerc than he had been throughout the rest of the season, so there is that element to it. I do feel Ferrari may adopt an approach if they have a championship competing car like they did last season for some part, where they may favour someone like Charles Leclerc, who has proven to have been the better driver between the two, despite the fine margins between them. So I'd be surprised if we saw an inter-team battle there. Red Bull, we don't even have to go down that rabbit hole. We know what Red Bull's about, and Red Bull have won 2 championships doing that kind of thing. So, and plus the others that they had in the past. So they're certainly not going to want to risk anything by allowing their drivers to fight, especially if all 3 teams are literally within a tenth or so of each other next season fighting for the World Championship. So it sounds fun. Not sure how realistic it's going to be, but I certainly admire what Kimi 777 is going down, as well as having a brilliant tag name, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, I would really love that if that happens next year. That'd be a very entertaining season. We'll be very busy.
That's it. All bets are off back then. It will be one for the ages. Another one from F1 Fan 6972. Interesting name there. Inter-team battles. Sorry, I've read that one already. Not from you. Sorry. At least a freeway fight for the best of the rest in the constructors. So P4. So, I mean, we had this in 2020, didn't we? We had we had McLaren and Racing Point
And Renault.
And then we had it in 2021 with McLaren and Ferrari to a degree, and sort of Aston Martin were there or thereabouts, but they were never really quite on it. Renault as well. It was Alpine last season. Sorry,
Alpine,
I do get that confused. And then in 2022 we had McLaren and Alpine. Aston Martin never really were in that fight. They very much came a bit later on, and even then they were still behind McLaren and Alpine. I'm guessing, Lee, if we're going to get a freeway fight for P4, it's probably going to be those three teams, McLaren, Alpine and Aston Martin. And even then, Aston Martin will have to make a leap forward to join that fight.
Yeah, it'll be those three teams, unless we get a surprise from one of the Alphas that build a massive supercar. I mean, improvement in performance, not actually a supercar. But they could throw that curveball. But it's very likely it'd be those three teams that you mentioned if we're going to get a three-way fight, which would be very interesting if we do get a three-way fight.
Yeah, it would be. And I'd like to see that. I mean, not forgetting, of course, we've got some new drivers in those teams. We've got Oscar Piastri joining McLaren, which is certainly going to be, with all respect to Ricciardo, perhaps a step forward for them in that regard. To challenge Lando Norris, who's obviously, cemented himself as the outright leader of that team and certainly the most sought-after driver outside the top teams at this point in time. Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, whilst there's going to be a big battle there, they're certainly going to make each other raise their game in order to stay on top, so that would be quite interesting. And a very good Alpine car last season. Hopefully they can improve on that. Aston Martin will want to make a step forward, and they're going to have Fernando Alonso in their car. So that's always going to be
Alpine. He's going to want to beat Alpine.
And McLaren, he could really put the ghost of Christmas past, if you like, pun intended, behind him in 2023 with those two.
He'll want to beat Esteban Ocon, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If there's a driver in there he'll want to beat, it's definitely going to be Esteban. But, I certainly would love to see that. It'd be quite interesting to see how that goes down. And maybe those three cars might be good enough to challenge for a podium rather than the only one that we got from Lando Norris at Imola last season. So we'll have to wait and see. El Nino F1 2001 writes, Alonso wins for Aston Martin as their wish list item. Well, I admire the confidence. We'd probably have to get a Hungary-like race or a Monza 2020 for that to come through. But it's not out of the realms of impossibility. And Fernando Alonso has proven to still have what it takes if he has a car good enough to win. So, although I'm not sure that's very realistic.
Yeah, it's probably not very realistic, but I would love to see that personally. If he manages to win in the Aston Martin, I'm sure Stroll would love to see that as well. But I mean, the Stroll Senior, not obviously Stroll Junior, he want to win.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's very realistic. But you give Fernando the opportunity and the sniff of the opportunity, he will take it with both hands as much as he can. But it will need special circumstances to get it. I'd be very surprised if Aston Martin could win it on pure pace merit.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because they have a project going to 2026 where I think we're going to start to see Aston Martin really challenge at the front if they keep going the way that they are right now. And there's a lot going on there, but you're not really going to see a team that has the resources of the top teams until that time. So I think if they can make steady progress and maybe challenge for a podium in whether next season or the year after, they'll certainly be on the right track. A win, a lot would have to happen, but let's not rule it out. We've seen stranger things, and as the great late Murray Walker says, it's live sport, anything can happen, and so often it does.
Well, I would add that for this year, Aston Martin did seem quite capable in the wet. Fernando is quite capable in the wet.
They did, yeah.
So maybe all he needs is a wet race,
maybe
and a safety car, and There he is.
You never know. You never know, guys. But I admire the confidence. Chris Stevens, F1, writes, confirmation of Porsche, Hyundai, Honda and Ford joining the sport for 2026. Now, Chris hasn't mentioned whether or not these are the teams as teams in the sport or just engine manufacturers. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Lee, and suggest that he meant teams as manufacturer teams. And, I mean, look, it's the same old argument where we want more teams in the sport. I know we've heard rumours about Honda and Ford looking to join as engine manufacturers rather than just be teams. Porsche would obviously want to buy into an F1 team rather than make one because it's a lot cheaper. Hyundai, we've heard them mentioned, and it would be great to have a team from an Asian country enter the sport, possibly as a manufacturer. That'd be quite interesting. I just wonder if 2026 is probably not very realistic for teams, but as engine manufacturers, at least for Honda and Ford, it's certainly realistic.
Yeah, well, firstly, I just want to add that Honda is an Asian manufacturer as well.
Yeah, this is where I've embarrassed myself over and over again. Do you know why, Lee? Because I keep thinking of this is terrible because I keep thinking of Honda, like the British base when they were established at Brackley. And I know I'm trying to pull myself out of a huge hole that I've just dug amongst a lot of people that are probably screaming into their headsets or their laptops saying, "You're an idiot, Adam. Honda is an Asian country." So I'm glad that you've pointed that out to me, that they are an Asian team. So I do apologise. I was going to be more specific and say, what, South Korea for Hyundai? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Let's go with that one. I'll redeem myself by saying a South Korean F1 team.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'd be very interesting if those teams do come back. Obviously, Porsche is still circling for a team. And I believe Hyundai and Honda have registered their interest, although it doesn't mean a committal to an engine manufacturer. And then obviously Ford is being rumoured to be doing some form of collaboration with Red Bull. But having potentially, that'd be 9 manufacturers if you can count Audi and the existing 4.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to count it off the top of my head, but my will knowledge credibility has taken a massive dent in the last few minutes. So I wouldn't trust me right now on that one.
But if my maths is right, 9 manufacturers, if it happens, I mean, the sport will be in a very healthy state to get that position, even if it's teams or just engine suppliers. But obviously, if they're going to join in 26, they're going to need to do that committal next year, really, to start the planning for it. So we'll probably hear at least 1 or 2 of them confirm engine programs at the very least for 26. And as you said, maybe not a team. But obviously takes up a bit of time to spin up a new team if they're going to do a new team or not. But yeah, I really like the idea of those 9 manufacturers. That's mouth-watering.
Well, we just want to see more teams in the sport, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we understand the business side of things, and now F1 is a lot more lucrative now, which is why you're getting a lot more people trying to come into the sport than it was during a few years ago when times were difficult. And, F1 and the teams, they want to be protective of that and protective of their market share, really. So if it were to happen, it's going to require a lot of investment and a lot of resource to make it happen. I think this one is pretty much in the realms of a wish list or a Christmas wish, if you like. I just can't see them all joining as as teams, but I can see Porsche buying their way into an F1 team. Hyundai, I'm not sure, really. I've not seen enough at this point in time to really take that seriously. It's a nice idea. I really do think it is. I just don't think it's anywhere near enough traffic at this point for me to consider it as realistic. Honda and Ford, engine manufacturers. Where they would come into the sport, I don't know, but I can't see them joining as teams either. So certainly a wish, to say the least. I'm not sure. I don't think that's really going to work out or be realistic. But wait and see. 2026 is still a long time away. But as you said, Lee, if things are going to happen, they're going to happen very, very soon in order to make that work. The next one, from... Just trying to read the handle properly on this one. Sorry. Nick Fields. Hi, Nick. He's wrote wet tyres that work. Well, I mean, yeah, that would be quite nice. I mean, one of the things I think we can complain about from last season, and for a few seasons actually, is the fact that the wet tyres have practically become redundant because there's a finite working window, Lee, that's almost as short as how long an avocado is ripe before it ends up going off. And the wet tyres are just terrible. They don't work. Like, the track's either too wet for them and it's not safe to race, or it's not wet enough. And there's such a fine margin for that at the moment.
Yeah, or they need to look at bringing in super wets or something so they can race on when it's too wet for the wets. Because it's silly that the wets you can't race on the wets when it's too wet. I think it's ridiculous personally.
Well, they do have I can't remember what it was. Those little aero capers that they had that we're talking about. They were like little shields on the back of the car, on the back of the wheels, on the rear tyres, which would stop the spray coming out.
Yeah.
That was something that they're looking into as a possibility for 2023, possibly. I'm not sure if it's going to be introduced then, but it is a way to make wet weather racing a little bit easier so that we could end up with wet tyres that work, as Nick has requested. So we'll have to wait and see, but I do think we do need to have better wet tyres in F1 regardless, because it just... wet weather races, everybody loves them. Not so much for the jeopardy, but there's always going to be an element of risk to it, and it does have the ingredients to randomize the order to a degree. Some of the best races in F1 are wet races. So, I mean, it's got to that point now, Lee, where every time we see wet weather on the horizon, everyone starts to worry and panic out of fear that we're going to get another Belgium Grand Prix from 2021.
Yeah, I fear and panic on that as well. I used to really enjoy a wet race, but it's not been as enjoyable to watch as of late because of the red flags and such. So I really do hope that one does happen.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. So we got another one from Michael Andretti F1. I'm pretty sure this is not the Michael Andretti because I'm pretty sure he has better things to do than message us. But thanks for the comment anyway. He's wrote, Andretti team given the go-ahead by the FIA to enter Formula One. Well, I mean, on this one, that's a massive must. We've seen some news stories about them being able to prove that they have the necessary funding and backing and resource to make an F1 team entry possible, and that's buy their way in by paying the teams the 200 million for the revenue share and other things as well. Obviously, we haven't heard too much in terms of whether that's going to happen, but I think for F1 and also for American F1 as well, I know we have Haas already, but a real F1 entry from the States that has the backing of the name Andretti, I think, given its prowess in American racing, that's a very big move for F1 if it was to happen.
I think it's a must-have for the sport, as you said. Being the Andretti name, the fact that they've proven that they can fund the 200 million buy-in. I believe they're also building a whole new garage for all the Andretti operations, including a potential future F1. I think it's supposed to cost another $200 million to build the whole garage, if I recall. But although Haas is an American team and it has its headquarters in the US, a lot of the work is done in Italy. But Andretti, obviously, if he gets the go-ahead, wants to do all the work in the US, which will be a first for modern F1 of having a team fully operational out of the US with 3 races in the US coming next year. I think they need to approve this, and obviously get some extra 2 drivers and another team on the grid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd fully agree with that one, and hopefully it comes through. So I am definitely canvassing for that one. That's a huge shout. So yeah, thanks for that one, Michael Andretti, or maybe the real Michael Andretti. Maybe he's trying to feed his way in through the airways and picked our show of all shows to try and get his foot in the door, but we'll have to wait and see. Michael Massey's #1 fan. I mean, that's got to be a parody account. They've wrote, good stewarding by the stewards. Very ironic for that to come from Michael Massey's biggest fan. But I think more consistent stewarding.
Yeah.
And I also think there are 1 or 2 racing rules that I'm not a fan of, particularly the new overtaking rule that they introduced last season. You know, the one where they say that a car has to be a reasonable amount inside another car for them to be given room. And we had that incident with Hamilton and Verstappen where I thought, and some other people thought, that Max was far enough alongside Lewis, and yet Max got a penalty for it. And yet what we saw in Silverstone, when Max forced Mick Schumacher wide, when he was on the outside of him, and yet Max did everything legal, but everyone was complaining because nobody understood the new rules properly, or that they just didn't make sense in terms of giving each other fair room. And you know, there's myriad reasons that we can go down as to why the stewards were inconsistent last season, but I think, Lee, this is definitely in the realms of another one that has to be a must in order to make, I suppose, ease the burden on F1. I mean, you're never going to really get rid of that with social media and fans having their opinions on certain things, but at least if the stewards are more consistent and not making stuff up on the fly, that we saw a little bit last season, then maybe it'd be, I don't know, things might settle down a little bit and we can just enjoy the racing.
Yeah, well, we always say that in Formula One, to win a world championship, consistency is key. I think that applies to the stewards, that consistency is key, and that's what they've really been lacking for a while now. And yeah, I would love that as well, just to be consistency on the rulings, that it's easy to understand as a fan. Teams and drivers can understand where they stand, but more importantly, the fan understands the outcome or what's happening and not question it and accuses effectively the referees for not doing it, for making it confusing and making it a mess, which has been more bad publicity on the sport, which is not what Formula One or the FIA want, but they keep doing it.
No, that's it. I absolutely agree with you. I think we've got time for one more, if we can. And this is kind of a nice one. Actually, I'm going to do a two-parter because this come from the same person. They didn't leave their social tag, unfortunately, which I think is a little bit strange. They sent this one via email, so I won't read the email out because I want to keep that private. But they wrote, Vettel announces that he rejoins the sport and Daniel Ricciardo gets a seat on the grid in 2024. I mean, both very, very nice suggestions. I don't know if I really would feel that Seb announces. I mean, rejoining the sport in what capacity? I guess they might mean as a driver, but maybe Seb the head of the FIA, or perhaps as the new race director. That might be quite interesting.
Yeah. Or I was going to say he comes out saying that he's going to be joining Audi in 26, but that's not next year.
Well, as Mick Schumacher's personal driving coach, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or the new team principal at Williams.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, look, people like Jenson Button were thrown in. Why not Seb? But yeah. I can't see a former driver like that young join a team like that. Maybe someone like Susie Wolf is probably more realistic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going to miss Seb Vettel, but I don't think Seb's going to go away from the sport completely. You know, I don't believe for a second when he says, I'm probably not going to follow F1 now that I've finished it. I'm like, no, of course he will. He'll want to see how things are getting on. But I think we'll see him involved in some capacity. I'm just not sure if it's going to be related to employment within F1, whether that be a driver, a team boss, or working with the stewards or something, as useful as someone like him would be. But we never know. And the other one was obviously Daniel getting a seat on the grid for 2024. I think, again, this one might be somewhat realistic, but I don't know. Something has to happen, perhaps. And also, it has to be within Daniel's interest as well. I remember listening to him on the Beyond the Grid podcast, and he said he needed a break away from F1, hopefully to come back stronger, maybe look at 2024. But I can't see him wanting to join a midfield team or someone that wasn't very good. I feel like he'd want to come back if the opportunity was available to him where he could compete for race wins again. I'm not sure where that would be.
Yeah, my first instinct would be that he confirmed that he's joining the sport or got a race seat at the expense of Sergio. That would be my first instinct. But then going back to one of the early suggestions, if Andretti does get approved, and once they announce the engine supplier, yeah, maybe Daniel may want to join and be in the lead team for a new team in the sport and being the main number one driver for Andretti. If they're saying if they get approved, you never know. That may be another option he may consider as a different project. But that's probably going to be a midfield team and not a championship winning team from the start, even if that does get going even for 24, which is probably still getting close in time for that if it was a 24 start for the team. But yeah, I can't see him going elsewhere, to be honest, if it's not Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, what about AlphaTauri? I mean, you've got Yuki Tsunoda in there. You've got Nick De Vries next season. Two drivers that, whilst Yuki has some relative level of experience now, this will be his third season in F1. He's very much embedded in the sport. Nick De Vries, another driver that has shown potential, but has never really been in the sport for longer than 5 minutes. He's practically driven half the cars on the grid, so I suppose that counts for something. I'm not sure. I think there might be an opportunity there. I'm just wondering, though, if it's more likely that Red Bull would go with someone like a Liam Lawson, for example, in that seat, or maybe even Alex Albon if Williams are still struggling next season. And I don't think it's a seat that Ricciardo would be interested in either, because it's like, he could have gone to Haas if the rumours were true that they wanted him. Why not just do that instead? So I'd love to see Danny Rick in an F1 car again. I just don't really feel, unless something crazy happens where he has to step in for either Perez or Verstappen, I'm not really sure where that's going to come from, really.
Yeah, I as much as I would love it, I do agree. I don't think that one's very likely, unfortunately.
And if we saw, for example, Perez have a dreadful season at Red Bull, or he just wasn't really delivering in a tight battle between Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull, if I were Christian Horner, I'd be doing everything possible to get Lando Norris in. That would be the guy I'd want driving my car. Or if Charles Leclerc's had enough of Ferrari and he wants to step into the lion's den, no pun intended. Those are the kind of guys you look at, rather than someone like Ricciardo, who's 34 now? 33, 34. He's still a very, very good driver, but there's obviously a lot of question marks over his ability to deliver. That said, Red Bull will be best placed to analyse that, because he's going to be their development and reserve driver as well. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Yep, definitely wait and see on both of those.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty much it. We did have one more. Again, we didn't have the name for this one, so we can't read them out. I mentioned that Williams being closer to the midfield. I mean, yeah, Williams back in the midfield are pretty good. I mean, I just don't want to see Williams struggling at the back and being last week in, week out, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed with you there. I don't want the field to be broken into obviously the top three midfield and the last team. And unfortunately, the last team has been a bit cut back of late between Haas and Williams over the last few years. But you at the very least, and it's very more likely to happen than changing the top three, is the midfield closes up, and that includes the back of the grid. So even if Williams don't get it right next year, they will be closer. And then they will be closer still to the point that their midfield will have been, we talked earlier about a three-way fight for the best of the rest. You'll get to the point that there's a 4, 5, 6-way fight for the best of the rest. And that gap will slowly get closer to the top three once they're obviously over the seasons with the budget caps, and the difference closes that gap, which hopefully is intended, or the intention is that the gap closes. We'll get that, a 10-way fight, but you have to wait and see.
Yeah, you never know. Wishful thinking. Certainly at Christmas time, it's a good time to put it on a wish list. But I could very easily see in Williams being the team that gets bought by potentially like a Porsche or someone like that, replaced by them. It just seems, at this point in time, the obvious candidate. But we'll have to wait and see. Who knows? Williams may return to the midfield next season. Maybe they'll have a great car. Maybe with a new direction, with a new team principal. We'll have to wait and see. Although, even though it's still early, the clock is ticking on that to get sorted. But I think those were all the ones that we had. So thank you to everybody that sent those in. Very, very interesting shouts and wishes from you guys. Some of them are more realistic than others, of course. But very, very interesting. But until then, of course, I think that's all that's left to say, Lee, is just to thank everybody that's tuned in to the show this year. Whether this be your first episode or you've listened to almost every single one this year, we really appreciate that, and we thank you so much for your support. Of course, make sure, if you are new, to give us a 5-star review on your favourite pod platform. We'll give you a shout out in the next episode, which of course will be in 2023. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Lee, any final thoughts before we round off for 2023? Any last wishes that you might mention just before we sign off?
Obviously, so just again, thank you, and obviously everyone has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, really.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Enjoy the holiday season, guys. Hope it's a lovely new year, regardless of which team that you support. Obviously, it's not long now until the teams will start unveiling the new cars. Aston Martin and Ferrari at this point in time, the only two teams that have revealed their dates. Aston Martin on the 13th of Feb, Ferrari on the 14th of Feb. And pretty convenient day, because I'm hoping that Ferrari will not break my heart again this year. So we'll have to wait and see how that all unfolds. But looks like I'm going to have to get myself ready to love and hope again when it comes to the Scuderia. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please stay safe. Enjoy the holiday season wherever you are celebrating. I hope that you are having a good time. And we will see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast in 2023. But until then, remember as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
Bye.